All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. Before we get started, we'll do a little housekeeping real quick. So this week, Bob and I are just going to appear on this show because the Bayou Blitz will not be on this week because Brendan is out of town. Next week is Bob's turn to be out of town. So there will be no Under the Dome show next week. I'll be on the Bayou Blitz with Brendan on Wednesday nights. So, and that's a good thing because Saints training camp opens a week from tomorrow. So we will talk about training camp as the players are checking in. So I'm really excited about that because this has been a heck of an off season. It's a lot of changes late, and yet the team, I don't know. We don't know anything more about this team than we did in January. Before, or really February, before free agency started. It feels like it's a different team, but at the same time, we've got a lot of familiar faces. And as a result, and I wanted to start the show off with this quote, as a result, a lot of people, and I mean people by national media pundits, want to act like this is the worst team in the NFL. And on the day that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have unveiled the old original creamcicle uniforms in honor of their 50th anniversary. 1976 was their first season. I can't believe it's been 50 years. Well, I just went to my 40th high school reunion this past Saturday. I don't know who all these old people were, but they weren't the people I went to high school with. That's all I can say. But John McKay, my favorite Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach, had this to say for his first training camp. It bothers me that the national media have picked us to be the worst team in football because what they are doing now is challenging your physical and your mental capacity and my ability to coach you. Now, this hurts me. Second worst team, I could stand it, but not the worst team. Classic John McKay. The only other quote, well, there's a bunch of quotes I like better, but the only other quote I really like from his training camp, his first training camp, was that kicker who said that McKay on the sidelines McKay watching him kick in practice made him nervous, and that's why he missed so many kicks. And McKay's response to that was, well, we'll have to tell him. Please tell him that I plan on attending all the games. Oh, John McKay. Even when you're losing, you're winning because you got a great coach.
Yes.
Would you? I mean, I've watched a lot of bad Saints football. I got the 76 team running behind me right now. I've watched a lot of bad Saints football. This is not going to be the worst team. It's certainly not going to be the worst team in football. I have a hard time accepting that because the league is so geared towards parity that I just can't see this team losing, 15, 14 games. I mean, last year they won 5 games. Now, granted, 2 of the wins were when everyone was healthy. But you fired your head coach. You've got an interim head coach. We're injured all to hell. And you still won 5 games. You won 3 games with the interim head coach, something the Saints have never done with an interim head coach. And this schedule doesn't look any more daunting, than last year's schedule. I could see a slow start, but I just can't see them losing, more games than last year. How do you read this team? I mean, we're just guessing, but how do you look at this team? Do you think this team is better than the injured team that finished in 2024?
Yeah, I do. I think they have better coaching. Now, I mean, we don't know what Kellen Moore is going to be like as a head coach, but he's certainly been a successful offensive coordinator. Brandon Staley has been a successful defensive coordinator. Uh, I feel like the coaching staff has more direction
Mm-hmm.
than the previous couple of years done by the staff. And you said it before we went on the air, and I've written about it. Uh, the national media and the fans who want to just automatically bury the Saints. You're going in with blinders. I mean, Alvin Kamara is still one of the most talented players at his position. Same with Demario Davis. You have, if they stay healthy, you have what we think is the makings of a good offensive line. Jawan Johnson, a decent tight end. You have a track team duo in Shaheed and Olave, who, if they stay healthy, they're going to make a lot of plays. Cam Jordan has some football left in him. Brian Bresee has been criminally overlooked this offseason. Are there major holes on this roster? Yeah, I believe there are until they take the field and hopefully prove me wrong. Are there major questions that don't look like they have been answered by off-season moves? Also, yes. But those major questions and those quote-unquote major holes, they're being filled by many of the same faces that we saw last year. The same squad who you pointed out had 5 wins with basically a middle school offense. Players who aren't even on NFL rosters right now, were starting games or playing significant snaps. And more so than the 5 wins that they had, they honestly should have won 3 additional games. 2 of those, Philadelphia and Washington, were were in the NFC Championship game and Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And this schedule, at least as it unfolds on paper, doesn't look nearly as challenging as it did last year. I mean, they have 4 games on their schedule against playoff teams from last year, and 2 of those 4 are within their own division in Tampa Bay. Then you add Seattle is the only other team on the schedule that finished with a winning record. So you have 5, and I know you can't go solely based off of last year's results. Of course, we all know that. But you also got to start somewhere. And there are games against Miami, who I think is going to be a bad team. The Patriots, the Giants, they're bad teams. Seahawks, Cardinals, or Jets, Titans, bad teams.
Mm-hmm.
Seahawks, Cardinals, overrated in my opinion. Bears, overrated. So I mean, it's not a stretch for me to say that this team could squeak above 500. Now, that's if everything falls in a row. But and I wrote about it a couple of days ago on Saints Wire. I don't remember the NFL Network analyst, but the article was centered around him. He did a short video montage where he predicted every game of every team, and he had the Saints finishing 2-15.
Yeah, it's Eric Alper, I think is his name.
The worst record in the NFL.
Yeah.
And he called the Saints the NFL's homecoming game.
Mm-hmm.
Or the get right and the get right game in 2 separate quotes, for every team on their schedule. And I'm with you. I don't think this team is that bad. I don't.
I just can't accept it because I just don't see a team the team's that much better than the Saints. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not a believer in Carolina. Mm-hmm. I'm not a believer in the Bears. I'm not a believer in the Giants or the Titans or the Browns.
Nope.
I
forgot about the Browns.
Yeah.
We know the Falcons will always Falcon.
Yeah. The Jets. I'm not a believer of the Jets. The Dolphins look like they're imploding. the Bengals can't even sign their first round pick, and we'll talk about our second round pick in just a minute, but they can't even sign their first round pick. Whereas at least in the second round, no one has signed the second round yet.
I know.
And they're all waiting on guaranteed money because the Texans kind of set that market last year. And, you know, the quarterback, Tyler Shuck, is kind of the linchpin right now, it seems. How much guaranteed money does he make? Because that's going to kind of determine the market. And so I'm sorry. I just find that there's a lot of mediocre teams in the NFL. And I think a couple of teams are going to fall back. I think Washington's going to take a step back. You know, Tampa probably wins the division again by default. But they're a one and done playoff team. They're not these world beaters. No one is there's no New England Patriots team out there. And I know Philadelphia just won the Super Bowl, but there's no team that I feel like is just a machine out there, or Peyton Manning at his prime, or even the Saints with Drew Brees. I don't feel like there's that team that's just going to hang 40 points each week on somebody, and you're going into a buzzsaw. And I don't know why that is, other than there's just a lot of turnover in the league right now. And there's just not a dominant team. There are some very good teams, but not teams that you can just at the beginning of the season go, okay, that's a playoff team. That team's going to win a division. That team's going to go to, because yeah, the Ravens and the Bengals, for example, are most people's teams to pick to win or challenge for that division title. But the Steelers do have that whole never had a losing season under Mike Tomlin out there, and it's going to be a heck of a challenge for him not to break that. I mean, to keep that streak going. But yeah. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I just. And it's probably because, you know, I'm looking at it from the Saints standpoint, that I just don't think the Saints are that much more inferior than these other teams. That's just the way I see it. Mm-hmm. So to me, then, there are two keys to determining the success of this season. Number one, we've got to be able to manufacture a running game. Yep. And that's the offensive line, and that's finding a running back who can actually run between the tackles and be an every down ball carrier. And I don't know who that guy is yet. I think Alvin Kamara is going to do his Kamara stuff, but you know, who is going to be the inside runner? Who's going to be that guy? If Kamara gets forced to doing that again, that's not good. That's not good for anything. And the offensive line has to show that it's going to be a much better offensive line than it has been the past 2 years, including being healthy. And so I think that's the first step. The second step, and this is where I was going with this, the quarterback position. Tyler Shuck holding out. And I know a week in contract terms is an eternity.
Yeah.
But a week for fans before training camp starts, Shuck cannot afford to miss anything. He can't afford to miss any time, because the more time he misses, the more likely Spencer Rattler is week one starter. He's not going to be the long-term starter, but it's more likely he starts the beginning of the season. So to me, then, what do you think is really the holdup on Tyler Shuck? Is it just the guaranteed money?
It's got to be the guaranteed money, or it may be incentives built into the deal also, because there's no other explanation. These contracts, I mean, everybody knows that the first round contracts are slotted salary wise. Well, it's the same thing, folks, for each round, after that. Now It's tweaked a little bit. The draft slot money is tweaked a little bit according to position too. Which is exactly why you said most of the second round picks are waiting for Shuck, who was the 10th pick in that round, waiting for that deal to come down. And then once it does, I think we'll see an avalanche of signings within 24 hours after that. So therefore, since the money is slotted, at least up to a certain degree, it has to be guaranteed money, with probably incentives built in also. The incentives part is 100% a good idea by Shuck and his people, because again, we've talked about this. Shuck has the negotiating power right now, because he can always sit at that table and say, Coach Kellen Moore, you drafted me. And you drafted me because A, you don't have a quarterback, but B, you had your chance to get Jackson Dart. You had your chance to get Shedeur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, whoever else. You didn't. You picked me. So if I'm your guy, then I want incentives for playing time, snaps, yardage, touchdowns, etc. So I don't blame him for that part. The guaranteed money though pisses me off. I won't lie. The CBA collective bargaining agreement, the players and their agents, more accurately, have obviously found a loophole around that, to basically protect potential first and second round busts. Well, if you wash out and you're in the league, out of the league after 2 years, if you're a Stephon Anthony, you're still going to get your money. And owners, of course, we don't want to pay you if you're going to be a bust, and we have to move on from you in 2 years or 3 years. This is a part of the equation. That the NFLPA and the league and the owners really have to fix at the next negotiating table.
Yeah, the big thing with Shuck too is he, like you said, he is looking to be the starting quarterback of this franchise. He's a quarterback taken. I think he's the only quarterback taken in the second round in this draft. So you're looking at a guy who looks at himself as a low first round picked in the second. So he is looking for something closer to that security of a first round pick, 5-year deal. I don't know what the number is. Some people speculate it's $1 million. Some people speculate it's $10 million. To me, I think the holdup is the precedent it's going to set. I think the NFLPA is pushing the Saints. Pushing Shuck to get that guaranteed money, because then you set it for everybody else. Whereas the ownership is like going, do not give him that guaranteed money, because now you screwed it up for the rest of us. But honestly, it's the it's really the Texans that messed it all up by offering it in the first place. Yes. Just like the Browns when they made Deshaun Watson that guaranteed money in that contract really screwed up the market for all the other quarterbacks. So when people are mad that the Saints, quote unquote, overpaid for Derek Carr, well, because Deshaun Watson kind of set that market. So you saw not only Derek Carr get paid, but you also saw Daniel Jones get paid, Kirk Cousins get paid. Guys that you should have been able to sign for a much cheaper deal, you had to technically overpay them because Deshaun Watson had set the market, and every agent is watching this thing to say, that's what we're going to sign for now. You just paid him this and you guaranteed him this, then this is what we're going to take. This is what we'll take. And you got an owner like Mike Brown, who still has his first communion nickel, like my grandfather used to say, who won't even pay his first round pick.
Yeah.
That's just really, it's going to be a mess. It really will be a mess. So yes, Mark, I agree. Shuck needs to sign soon, but there's just a huge fight over that guaranteed money. Bob, do you think he will sign within, if he doesn't sign before Wednesday, or next Wednesday, I should say, do you think he signs maybe by the first weekend? Or do you think this holdout lasts a while?
I still do think you think that if he's not signed by training camp, that he'll be in camp by the weekend, and maybe that's just the hopeful side to me.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you need him to be your quarterback, at least in theory. Again, you're the one that targeted him.
Mm-hmm.
And the longer he misses, I mean, if a veteran under a new coaching staff, if a veteran it misses a week, it's not the end of the world. We saw it with Breeze. We saw it with Kamara, Jimmy Graham, I think once, Michael Thomas. A rookie misses a week. It's an eternity. A rookie quarterback misses a week. You can almost write him off for at least the first half of the season.
Yeah.
I know that sounds like reverse hyperbole, but I mean, it's really not. You're that far behind. You already have the daunting job of reading NFL defenses who are so much more complex and faster than you're used to seeing at the collegiate level. But now you're almost hopelessly behind learning the playbook and building up chemistry and rapport with your teammates. It feels like an almost impossible situation. So am I concerned? Yeah. But I still think that the deal gets done one way or another by, at the very latest, the first weekend of camp.
And the other thing is you only have 3 preseason games now, and the league is pushing to go to 2 with an 18-game season. So that, and with only 9 or 10 padded practices, you just don't get the reps anymore. I mean, back in the day, you had 6 preseason games. You could do 2 a days, 3 a days. I think they used to even do 4 a days, which I couldn't even imagine.
I know.
4 a days. I mean, it's just God. And I know it was to help get these guys get into shape, but I just can't imagine being able to lift my arms, because the Saints did 3 a days with Hank Stram, and they got their ass kicked, I think, by Minnesota one day, either the preseason or early in the regular season. It's probably early in the regular season. They got their ass kicked by the Vikings, which, I mean, the Vikings had been to either 3 or 4 Super Bowls by that time. Very veteran team. In fact, they were almost aged out. But regardless, one of the players made this comment about, after getting blown out by the Vikings, I'm so thankful Coach Stram went to 3 a days, because if we only did 2 a days, imagine how much worse the score would have been. Just, you got to have a sense of humor. But yeah, you just don't have the reps anymore. You have to take mental reps. And the problem is the game is faster. The defenses are more complicated than they were in the 70s, 80s, even the 90s. It's just so much mental processing that I just cannot imagine if he misses any amount of time in training camp, that he'll be ready to start before October. You're looking at it would be Rattler the first, and the first 4 games are probably the hardest games on the schedule. So it's I don't want to see Rattler. I mean, I really don't want to see him out there. I know what he can do. I think Shuck is just that much more talented than him. That doesn't mean I think Shuck is a franchise quarterback. It just means that I just find him to be more talented than Rattler. I think he's physically obviously bigger. He's physically stronger. Rattler, I think his ceiling is back up, and I don't know if that's going to be the case for Shuck yet or not, but I think with Rattler, that's his ceiling. So I don't want him to miss any time because I want this to be a fair competition that he wins outright and he wins it early. That way he gets the majority of the reps, so he will be ready because the season to me, like this is why we started with, whether or not this is the worst team or not. The season to me is a wash because you're building for the future. Well, the only way you build for the future is you get your young quarterback out there and get him the experience and let him play all these games so he understands the speed of the game and gets on that progressive stance or progressive track, I should say, where after Thanksgiving and December, he is playing his best football rather than, by December, he's finally got 7 starts. I don't need that. Because then we're going to be asking the same questions again next year.
Exactly.
Is he the guy? And if he proves not to be the guy, if he proves that he is not getting better, he's getting pulled a lot, we have to go to Rattler, then we can make the decision maybe we draft another quarterback next year. That's all part of the evaluation. So, anyway, that's just my mentality when it comes to this. You mentioned receivers, and of course, it's Garrett London? Who's the name? What's the name of it?
Garrett Wilson of the
Garrett
Jets.
Garrett Wilson. I confuse him with that Falcons receiver, Drake London. So Garrett Wilson just got paid. He's in the same draft class as Chris Olave. Are you paying Chris Olave?
No, not right now. First of all, Garrett Wilson is overrated. I have always said it. Chris Olave, line them up as football players. I will take Chris Olave on my team before Garrett Wilson every single time. Is Garrett Wilson a bad football player? No, but he's not the high. He's not at the skill level of the highest paid receiver in the NFL history. You look at game by game average. Olave averages more catches, more yards, a higher yardage per catch, and similar touchdown production. Now, here's the rub. Garrett Wilson has yet to miss an NFL game.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Olave only missed a couple games in each of his first 2 seasons. You could tolerate, players get banged up. You lose a player for 2 or 3 games a year. You can live with that. What you can't live with is your number 1 wide receiver going down before the midseason point, which is exactly what happened to Chris Olave last year. I'm getting to a point with this, folks. And it wasn't just he blew out his Achilles or he blew out his ACL or it's a pectoral injury. It's an injury that requires surgery. That it happens. No, this is a career concerning concussion issue, repeated concussion issue. So to me, the Saints picked up Chris Olave's 5th-year option, which means he's now under contract with you through this season and next season. So there is no rush to get to the negotiating table. It's not like he's going to hit free agency at the end of this year. So if it's me, it's not that I'm against signing Chris Olave, extending Chris Olave. I'm against extending Chris Olave now, because to me, Chris, you have to prove that you could stay healthy for the majority of a season. That the concussions aren't going to, 1 or 2 more blows to the head, and you're out for your career. Forget season, you're out for your career. Looking at it from a business aspect, that's a hefty investment that you just lost. And not only does he have to stay healthy, he has to show that he could be a number 1 receiver. A legitimate, game-changing number 1 receiver. I love Chris Olave as a player. I do. I'll take him not only over Garrett Wilson, but Drake London too. I think he's heads and shoulders a better football player than Drake London. But Is Chris Olave the guy that defensive coordinators go into every week saying, if we don't stop Chris Olave, we lose this football game? We have to do whatever it takes to at least limit Chris Olave. I don't think Chris has been that player yet. And if you're going to be the highest paid or one of the highest paid players at your position, you have to be that player. So he has to prove to me that he could be that. Now, if he does, if he's largely healthy throughout most of this season, and he's upwards, he's tracking to point 85, 90 balls, 1,400 yards, and close to 10 touchdowns. Then I go to the negotiating table before that fifth year cap escalation hits. But right now, I don't even consider talking numbers with Chris Olave and his people.
Yeah, it's hard for me to justify paying Chris Olave because he's missed so many games, and because unlike a hamstring injury or knee injury or even Achilles tendon, something like that, this is an injury that can come back just from a blow, just from a tackle. You get tackled, the head gets driven into the turf. That could be a concussion. Now, to Chris Olave's credit, he is coming back. In the footage I've seen of him, he has come back in better shape. He looks more bulked up. He's probably going to play with the Guardian cap all year. But one of the things that you said was defensive coordinators do not stay up at night figuring out how to stop him. Well, the Carolina Panthers last year, I thought, took a cheap shot to take him out. Everybody wants to blame Derek Carr or whomever that threw the ball to him and giving him quote unquote hospital balls. But Carolina, they went straight for his head. They didn't even play the ball. They went after his head and knocked him out. And then the Saints passing game was crippled from that point forward. They knew it. So that's something else that Chris Olave is going to have to deal with is teams thinking, I'm going to give him a shot. And it may cost me 15, but if I get him out of the game, that's good for us because the Saints don't have many weapons. So that's, to me, that's the hard part about justifying paying him, because it's too scary a proposition. I need to see if he plays 14 or more games. I need to see the stats. I need to see him. And I don't think he'll ever be a number one wide receiver. And I mean that in terms of he's not a Joe Horn. He's not a Marcus Colston. He's not a Michael Thomas. He is, and we were talking about this beforehand, and we love him to death. He's a friend of the show, but he's kind of like a Quinn Early. He's kind of like a Lance Moore. He's almost what you thought you were getting with Robert Meacham when you drafted him in the first round. And Robert Meacham couldn't even get out of being number 4 receiver. He couldn't unseat Colston. He couldn't unseat Devery Henderson. And a lot of times he got beat out for that third receiver by Lance Moore or David Patton or I'm trying to think of the other guys they've had in the past in there. But, so it was hard for him to make an impact on this team until the 2009 season. And he did it, majority of it, by beating up on nickel cornerbacks. That was his best season. I think he had 9 touchdowns over 1,000 yards receiving. But, he did it as a inside guy, a slot guy. He was not. And when the Chargers paid him to be the number 1 guy, they found out really quick he's not that guy. He ain't that kind of guy, So, I think it's a little bit of a disservice to Olave. I think he's better than Meacham.
Oh, yeah.
But I just don't see him being that top guy. So, and with so many talented receivers coming out of the draft year after year after year, it's so hard for me to sit there and say, yeah, let's pay this guy. And we have the money now, but let's pay him and we'll take our chances with other positions in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I think we could spend that money better elsewhere on the team with a more durable player, and or more durable players, and just go draft a wide receiver.
Yep.
Don't let him walk yet, but next year, while he's in his 5th-year option, draft a guy and let's see if that guy can take him out the way that Michael Thomas took out Brandon Cooks, and it made that decision easy for the Saints. That's just my opinion with him right now. The concussions just scare me way too much, and I don't trust guarding caps and working out and getting in better shape. It's not something you can just rehab.
Right.
It's something that you're either prone to them or you're not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, since we brought up receivers now, let's look at the best receivers in franchise history, the most durable receivers. And we've been bringing up a lot of them tonight already. But if you were to put out your top 4 or 5 receivers in Saints history, who would they be?
The top 3 are easy and really shouldn't be questioned by anybody with sanity. And I'm flexible to the order, but my personal order is Michael Thomas, Marcus Colston, Joe Horn. There is nobody close to those 3. Now, if I were to round out my top 5, I put Lance Moore at number 4, only because Lance was dependable, had the trust of his quarterback, and was able to to succeed both from the slot and from the outside. So those are my top 4, and I mean it's a stretch for me to get to 5. The Saints have had a lot of pretty good receivers. The great ones or very good ones are the tougher ones to find. Obviously, because of a personal relationship with him, and just because also I was just a fan of watching him play. I'm tilted towards Quinn Early. I love Quinn Early. Devery Henderson was really fun to watch play. I know you're an Eric Martin guy. I hated Eric Martin. I did. I hated Eric Martin. And I mean, reaching back, for you real old schoolers, Danny Abramowitz. And, honestly, I think based off of production, I would probably put Abramowitz in my top 5. I spit out my top 3, without difficulty. Moore and Abramowitz, or flip flop them if you want. Those are my top 5. Thomas, Colston, Horn, Abramowitz, Moore.
No, and I meant to do this before we started talking about receivers. I'm going to jump over to, I had Saints Golden Age highlights up there, but let's just go through the receivers right now. Danny Abramowitz just had a birthday. I think he's now 79 years old. Man, I can't believe
right.
Now, I have my only memories of Danny Abramowitz are via NFL films. I was way too young,
right,
to actually have sat there. And he retired in '73, so I'm too young to remember him saying, "Okay, yeah, I saw Danny Abramowitz play for the Saints." I don't have any memory of that. But Danny Abramowitz had a streak of 105 consecutive games with a catch. He had He was the first Saints Pro Bowl wide receiver. Went to the Pro Bowl in '69. Won the receiving title for most catches in the 1969 season. Everybody knows his story. 17th round draft pick out of Xavier, who gave up football that year, was going to get cut, refused to leave, hung around, became the Saints' top receiver and he was slow, he was short. He's a white guy. I mean, but he fit that era and it's hard for people to look at him and go, "Oh yeah, that's a great receiver." But he fit that era because he just was a tough guy who sacrificed his body to make the catch. And he played on losing teams. So, that was another reason he gets forgotten. But I mean, part of what happened with Archie Manning was that he didn't have receivers until 78. Abramowitz was traded in 73, Manning's, third season. So Danny is always going to be, and he was one of the charter members of the Hall and at Saints Hall of Fame. Danny's going to be one of those receivers who will always get mentioned as one of the greatest receivers in Saints history, but because we've had so much talent now come in, he's going to get pushed off and forgotten. So my top four will always be the three guys you mentioned, Colston, Thomas, and I can't believe I just forgot the third guy, Joe Horn. Those are going to be the top three. I'm going to put Eric Martin at number 4 just because Eric Martin was the black version of Danny Abramowitz. LSU kid, he was slow too.
Oh yeah,
tough. My God, he was tough.
I apologize for the interruption. I'll tell you why I hate Eric Martin. There's so many reasons to hate different Saints players of that era because of what I'm about to say about Martin. Against the 49ers or in the playoffs, where the hell was Eric Martin? Yeah. And again, you could say the same thing about Bobby Hebert, so many other players, especially on that offensive side. But yeah, that in a nutshell is why I hate Eric Martin.
Yeah, and Hemisphere, I meant to say this while I saw your comment. Ask Steve Young about concussions at sending retirement. Ask Roger Staubach too. Mm-hmm. Roger Staubach had to retire because of the excessive concussions. But yeah, Eric Martin was that possession receiver. He was never going to break open a game. And the problem was Carl Smith always sent him to the same areas, the middle of the field. So all that happened was safeties would just sit back there and wait for Eric to come in that spot and either pick off Bobby Hebert or knock the shit out of Eric Martin when he catch the ball. And because they didn't run very much outside passing or a lot of complicated pass routes, and I know Hebert would go, but let me tell you something. I know Bobby. I can hear Bobby talking about this, but it's true. They didn't run a lot of complicated pass routes because Carl Smith and Jim Moore and even Jim Finks' philosophy about the team was we're going to play a game that's ball control, short passing game, run the ball. We're not going to throw the ball over the field. So I think that also hurts Eric Martin.
It does.
And Eric Martin kind of became a crutch for Bobby. Bobby wasn't somebody who liked to spread the ball around a lot. He knew Eric would catch everything that he threw at him, and Bobby was not a very accurate quarterback. So, we talk about Derek Carr and his issues with Chris Olave. Ask Bobby Hebert one day about his issues with Lorenzo Hill.
He hates him. I know for a fact he hates him.
It drives him. He drove him nuts because he would run bad routes. Brett Perryman wouldn't even throw to him. Yeah. Brett Perryman took to the media like Brandon Cooks bitching about Hebert not throwing him the ball, always throwing Eric Martin. So, but yeah, you're right, Hemisphere. There are a lot of dirty hands. Why that era of Saints football wasn't good. And a lot of it was based off of the way that the Saints built their team. They built the team around the defense to win the game, not the offense. They wanted a mistake-free offense.
Mm-hmm.
So, but let's talk about, we're not going to disagree on any of the top four, but how about other receivers who just outside of the top four? Who would you put in that group?
I mean, we mentioned Quinn early. I would definitely put Quinn in there. Quinn's numbers, he's still in the top 10, top 12 range, of career receptions, yardage, and touchdowns. He went about his job so quietly. I think I've always thought that Devery Henderson, you talk about, they drafted Meacham in the first round. Couldn't beat out Devery Henderson. They bring in other guys because they wanted to replace Devery Henderson. Devery would beat him out. I think that there's a lot to be said for that. Michael Haynes, I don't think gets enough love. Now, most of Quinn Early's production, all of Mike Haynes' production came when the Dome Patrol started to get old and leave. So we saw the disintegration of the Mora teams, which is why I think both Quinn and Haynes gets forgotten a little bit. And I know you agree with me on this next statement. Wes Chandler is one of my favorite Saints of all time.
Oh, yeah.
The only reason Wes Chandler is not in my top four, and even would have an argument for three, is because he only played 3 years. That first year he was primarily just a punt returner. But I think the fact that they gave up on Wes Chandler after 3 years, gave up on Ken Burrow after 1 year, it pisses me. It will piss me off until the day I die. You had Wes freaking Chandler. You had Chuck freaking Muncie. You basically handed the San Diego Chargers the most explosive offense in all of football, one of the most explosive in all of pro football history. And you had them. I understand why Muncie had to go. I, to this day, don't understand why Wes Chandler had to go. Yeah, I know Bum Phillips' philosophy of football, but it's Wes Chandler. You find a way to make it work. My God.
Well, Bum made two big mistakes. Number one is he gave up on Archie Manning, and from that point forward, he would have a quarterback problem for the team. There's no way of getting around that. Your quarterback was not. Your quarterback problem would haunt you the rest of your time with the Saints. You drafted Dave Wilson. He gets injured in 82. You go with Ken Stabler because you think Stabler can win playoff games for you. And, and Archie had never been to the playoffs. So, you make the decision to go with Ken Stabler, trade Archie. Ken Stabler's actually done. His knees are shot, but he still has a good season, 82 and 83. So you think you can still roll with him. But, Dave Wilson never pans out. Then you go get Richard Todd, and just your team's lost because your quarterback position wasn't strong enough and because you didn't have good enough receivers
right
when it mattered. When you needed somebody to stretch the field. Lindsey Scott was not a good receiver. Jeff Groth was, but Jeff Groth, he was a poor man's Lance Moore, essentially. He was a guy that's going to be a good, solid possession receiver. You watch any of those old games, and they keep comparing Jeff Groth to Fred Biletnikoff, which was kind of a joke.
Yeah.
Fred Biletnikoff was so covered with stickum anyway, which was illegal by that point. But he was not a Biletnikoff. He was just a solid possession receiver. Your other receiver was your Taysom Hill character, Guido Merkins. He is going to be your defensive back, your kick returner, your backup quarterback, your guy who does all that stuff. You know, he can't be one of your top two receivers on the team, but he was. Yeah, Wes Chandler getting traded to the Chargers was good for Wes, bad for the Saints. Because unlike Muncie, who was out of the league by 1985, Wes Chandler would play all the way to, I think, 88 when the injury started to catch up with him. But he was just magical. You know, he really was. And yeah, he's always going to be in my top 5 or 6 receivers. Now I was a fan of Ike Harris, but Ike Harris we kind of got at the end of his career. But really, I mean, yeah, the Saints of the 70s, we could go on forever with all the screw ups that they made. Giving up on Ken Burrow, who goes on to have a solid / Pro Bowl career with the Oilers. Drafting who's that kid from Larry Burton from Purdue, who had a grand total of 2 touchdown catches his entire NFL career. Just, you know, the receivers they had just were not good receivers. So that's why so many new names or recent names are up at the top of the list, and Joe Horn's in the background right now. Joe Horn, I can remember when the Saints signed Joe Horn. I'll never forget this. I heard Mike Detillier talking about this the day they signed him in 2000. He was the number 4 receiver with Kansas City.
Yeah.
Undrafted guy, came out of a junior college in Mississippi. And Mike Detillier says, well, he might make a good kick returner, you know, or something like that. And there was more hype about Jake Reed when they signed him than there was Joe Horn. The only unfortunate thing for me is the one playoff game Joe Horn went to, he got injured in the first quarter, actually in the first series.
Yeah.
And Willie Jackson had the game of his life against the Rams. And I can only imagine how good Joe Horn could have been in that game had he stayed healthy. So that's, you know, that always bothers me because I love Joe Horn. He was probably the first showman receiver that the Saints had since Wes Chandler. And he was even more of a showman than Wes Chandler. Just his dance and his whole demeanor. He was just the guy who was going to go out there and fire up the crowd, especially when he's playing at home, you know, with the cell phone and everything else. That was the guy. And that's when you finally started to say, okay, now the Saints have an offense, you know?
Yeah.
And the scary thing is he went to the Pro Bowl back when the Pro Bowl was always in Hawaii, and he was terrified to fly. He hated flying, you know, but he would go because it was a Pro Bowl. And do you remember how he trained to become an NFL receiver? Do you remember the story? Have you ever heard the story?
I know I've heard it, but I don't remember it.
He was broke, and he rented from a video store Jerry Rice's video on there's the cell phone game right there against the Giants. He rented a video from Jerry Rice on how to run routes and how to catch passes in the NFL, and he played it and studied it and played it and studied it. And in his first game against the 49ers as a Saint in I think 2000, Jerry Rice was still with the 49ers, and he was a little awestruck. He was a little starstruck, and he caught the ball right in front of the 49ers bench. And Jerry had kind of smacked him in the butt a little bit and said, you know, great catch, great catch. And Joe said he was on cloud 9 for the rest of the game because it was just like to think about, you know, I've got no money. I'm rent this videotape. This is going to be my future. I'm going to try and be as good of a player as Jerry Rice was while watching essentially a Jane Fonda equivalent of an NFL tape. And here I am now in the NFL playing on the same field as Jerry Rice. So yeah, it was something. That's why no matter how many more good receivers we have in the future, Joe Horn is always going to be in my top 3 list of great receivers for this team because of where he came from and how he was as a Saint. Yeah, I know. It's hard. It really is. I mean, a lot of 70s Saints players are in the Saints Hall of Fame. A lot of 70s Saints players get mentioned by old fans like me, but you still are like people who just don't get it. Like, I don't understand why you're so loyal to these guys. They weren't that good. Let me think. Dante Stallworth. How would you categorize Dante Stallworth? That was another first-round draft pick. And then I'm going to ask you opinions about tight ends in a minute.
I like Dante. Dante was like a lot of Tennessee wide receivers. Fast, could fly, take the top off of a defense, but not much of a route runner. Didn't do much over the middle. There was it. It ticked me off at the time. When Colston beat out Dante, and then just Peyton traded away Dante Stallworth, because I was thinking to myself, okay, that's great that Colston is beating out Dante Stallworth. Great for Colston, but logic told me, I'm like, well, we've just talked about through Saints history, so many Saints teams that didn't have any go-to wide receivers. Now with the emergence of Colston, you have Colston and Dante Stallworth. You have potentially 2, but Sean Payton trades one away. Now in hindsight, you understood why. Joe Horn, right. But in hindsight, Dante could have been, and not just as they said, but this goes for Dante's whole NFL career. I don't think he had the work ethic to be great. He had the physical tools to be great, but just never took that next step. So to me, Dante Stallworth's career as a Saint is just tons of unrealized potential. That's the way I remember it.
Yeah, when he first came out as a rookie, and I think he caught a touchdown pass in his first 6 games, and he was and it was always on one of those slant plays that he would just take to the house, and it was, you just saw the raw speed. And I really liked the combination that the Saints had under Hazlitt with Joe Horn, Dante Stallworth, Jerome Pathan, and then you brought in Michael Lewis. I really, really enjoyed that group, and I thought that was probably the best Saints receiving core I ever saw. And then Sean Payton came with Drew Brees, and you got Colston, Henderson, Moore, and Meacham, and you realize, no, this is what it's supposed to look like.
Yes.
I mean, because you would get a play like the Music City, not the Music City Miracle, the River City Relay, and then you'd miss the extra point. That was such a perfect encapsulation of the Hazlitt years.
Yes,
because for every good play, you would get this disaster play that would end up costing you the game. So yeah, I just got to the point where I sort of forgot about about Stallworth and Pathan and that whole group, because Marcus Colston was such the quintessential professional.
Yes.
And Henderson wasn't that good in the beginning, and CJ, Coach Johnson got him to be the better receiver. In fact, I don't know if you were paying that close attention to Saints stuff, but because Henderson came from LSU, he and Michael Clayton came out at the same time.
Yes.
And the Saints drafted Devery Henderson. The Bucs drafted Michael Clayton. And LSU/Saints fans were pissed off because they're like, you drafted the wrong LSU receiver.
Right.
You were supposed to draft Michael Clayton, and you took Devery Henderson, who had one big play to his name, the Bluegrass Miracle. That's where I started to say the Music City Miracle. Sorry, guys. I get the names of these plays confused sometimes. But he had the Bluegrass Miracle against Kentucky. And it was really just a fluke thing that he happened to be in the right place at the right time, probably ran the wrong route. And that's why the ball came to him where it did. But Michael Clayton turned out to be the worst of the two receivers. It's kind of like Gary James and Dalton Hilliard. A lot of people wanted Gary James over Dalton Hilliard. But Gary James went to the Lions. The Saints got Dalton Hilliard, and Dalton Hilliard turned out to be the better of the two backs. When Coach Johnson got a hold of Devery Henderson, he turned him into an NFL receiver.
He did.
And he became an incredible receiver under Drew Brees. And that's what elevated him. And I think when you were talking about Dante Stallworth, I think that was the problem. Dante Stallworth was not going to be that Devery Henderson kind of guy that you were going to be able to elevate into being that great guy. But yeah, outside of that group, outside of the Peyton receivers, it's hard to sit there and pick anybody else in the receiving group. These guys that on the team right now, do you see anybody that has potential to get to that level of top 10 Saints all-time receivers?
Yeah, I think based off of production, even though it's been a short sample size, I think Chris Olave, you can make a case for Chris Olave coming in at 9th or 10th right now. Because, I mean, the list of New Orleans Saints wide receivers that have had consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, there are only 4. Yeah. Chris Olave is one of them. So I think that goes a long way. I think Rashid Shaheed still has a ton of growth potential. Hopefully this is the coaching staff to bring it out of him. Because I mean, I've watched Rashid close, and obviously I'm a big fan because of his speed. But he's an underrated route runner. He just doesn't do it consistently. That to me is a market coaching. So if he gets some coaching, I think that Rashid Shaheed could turn into one whale of a player. So yeah, I absolutely see potential out of both or either Olave or Shaheed cracking the top 10. And again, you talk just production, purely production. Brandon Cooks with his first stint in New Orleans. I mean, all right, our top 5, top 6 if you count Chandler. And then you're into the Devery Hendersons or the Michael Haynes or the Dante Stallworths, the Jerome Pathans. I think Brandon Cooks is in that conversation though. At the back half, if you were to extend your top 10 to a top 12, Cooks is somewhere in that range, I think.
Yeah, Cooks is a hard one for me because I never liked the fact that he was so small. Yeah. To be a number 1 receiver. I felt like he was going to always be a slot guy and a speed guy, and it was hard for him to break out of that thing. Hemisphere, real quick. Yeah, there's no updates right now on Chuck. We just, both of us said that it's something that needs to be addressed as quickly as possible. A week before training camp is an eternity as far as contract discussions. But if he isn't there for the opening of training camp, if he doesn't get his contract signed by that first weekend in July of training camp, he's probably going to be so far behind he will not start probably the first month of the season. I'll be shocked if he does. So yeah, it's got to happen quickly.
Yeah, Hemisphere. Everybody knows that guaranteed money is the holdup.
Yeah.
I threw out my own speculation too that he probably wants some incentives built in based off of playing time, yardage thresholds, et cetera. That's just, I have not heard anything. That's just my own opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. And my last thing before we jump over to the tight ends, because it's going to be the same kind of theme. I like receivers that can take a hit and bounce back off of it. Just be that guy who defenses get pissed off about,
Yeah.
Not only do you make those contested catches, but, you're the guy who they just can't get to you. It's just so frustrating. So Michael Thomas highlights a playing right now. Michael Thomas was probably in my top 3, top 2 receivers all time for the Saints, just because of what he did out there. The only reason why he's not going to stay number 1 is probably the length of his career. Once the injuries took place, he could never bounce back from them.
Yeah.
And that's a huge knock because there are guys. Marcus Colston's gotten hurt before. He missed most of the 2007 season. Mm-hmm. And he was still there all the way through 2013. I mean, so the Colston will be number 1 because of that. But Thomas is right there. In fact, I think Thomas was on a Hall of Fame NFL career.
Oh yeah.
Until the injuries took their toll on him. So with that in mind, your top 3 tight ends in Saints history, I'm sure ours are going to be identical, but your top 3 tight ends.
Well, I mean, Jimmy Graham, and Jimmy Graham. But no, I mean, there's Jimmy Graham, who he if he stays a Saint, he is a Hall of Famer.
Oh, absolutely.
Without a doubt. Not just a Hall of Famer, probably mentioned on a very short list of best tight ends of all time.
Absolutely.
After Jimmy Graham, there's a big drop off, but you got to put Henry Childs at number 2. And folks, if you younger people, again, here we are back to the 70s Saints. But watch Henry Childs play. You couldn't guard him.
No,
defenses couldn't guard him. He was Kellen Winslow just before Kellen Winslow came along. And then after that, Shockey, probably. But it gets tough. I mean, is it Shockey? Wesley, you know what? No, it's Hobie Brenner.
Yeah.
It's
the name.
It's Hobie Brenner.
Yeah.
But even from Childs to Brenner is a pretty good drop off.
Oh yeah.
But yeah.
No.
But it's Jimmy G, Henry Childs, and Hobie Brenner.
Yeah. It's the tight end list is very, very short because, quite frankly, the tight end as a receiving threat really has come into vogue for the Saints over the past with Drew Brees. You could say a little bit with Archie and Hank Stram in that era, only because the receiving core was so bad until Wes Chandler got drafted and he traded for Ike Harris. But Bobby Hebert wasn't throwing to the tight ends for touchdowns. Hobie Brenner was there from 81 to 93, but Hobie Brenner was more known for his blocking, and he was the guy they would go to in the red zone, maybe on third down occasionally if Hebert doesn't overthrow somebody, but the idea of a Saints tight end stretching the field doesn't really happen until Jimmy Graham shows up. And guys and girls, there is not a Saints receiver in history who ever caught more than 12 touchdown passes in a season. And Jimmy Graham did it 4 out of the 5 years he was a Saint. 12 or more. I mean, he had 15 one year. That's unheard of. The closest you get to somebody who went 15 or more is Dalton Hilliard in 1989 when he had 18 touchdowns. and that's a running back. As a pass catcher, nobody did what Jimmy Graham did. I know he didn't block with a damn. That wasn't his job. All he did to quote Buddy Ryan when it came to Chris Carter, all he did was catch touchdowns, man. And that's all I cared about.
Yeah.
He was a 1,000-yard receiver as a tight end. And I know towards the end, people got pissed off because they said Drew was throwing to him too much, trying to force balls in there. He would drop passes. He would do all, they nitpicked everything because he held out for a contract, which I don't blame him. But you know what? He also hung up the friggin' goalpost in Atlanta and tilted it. Atlanta hated him.
Yeah.
Hated playing against him because he was going to score touchdowns. And do you know how many guys we can go through on the list and talk about that were Saints killers? Joey Galloway with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jerry Rice was a Saints killer. Steve Smith with the Carolina Panthers. These guys would always have these big freaking games against the Saints. So we finally got a guy who beats the hell out of our opponents, and our opponents despise Taysom Hill and Jimmy Graham. Absolutely, I'm gonna put those as my top players of all time. Just because they were so hated by the opponents.
Yep.
And so to me, it's like, oh, he can't block. Oh, that's a shame. That's too bad. Dallas Clark didn't do very well blocking as a tight end, but that son of a bitch could catch the ball. So I mean that's what mattered. Let's see, what's this? I'm slow on football news. Just found out it's because the linebacker from the Browns and wide receiver of the Texans got guaranteed. Yes. Well, it's really the Texans. The Texans gave a lot of guaranteed money for their second-round pick. So, yeah, it's not just the Saints not having their second-round pick signed. No, none of the second-round picks have signed. And Shuck is the keystone right now because whatever guaranteed money Shuck gets affects the people who were taken above and below him. Yep. So they're looking at the quarterback to see if he gets more, how much more he gets than the other guys got last year. So yeah, that's the big holdup. It's all about guaranteed money. It's funny. I had a whole bunch of names written down I was going to bring up because the Jim Haslett years were such a horrible time for tight ends. And same with Mike Ditka years were bad too. But, you had guys like Henrik Lusk, John Farquhar, it's just terrible tight ends. And it got so bad that when a tight end caught a pass, and it's funny because Ditka was a tight end in the Hall of Fame. But when a tight end caught a pass, they got like a standing ovation because it was like, oh, we actually threw to a tight end. And, you're looking at the 49ers with all their great tight ends, Brent Jones, John Franks, all those guys. And we send Wesley Walls over to the Carolina Panthers, who was a former 49er. He has a great career with them. It's worse than receivers as far as the desert. Last thing, Henry Childs, though, you mentioned Henry Childs in the 70s. One of the plays they used to like to run to Henry Childs a lot, and I can't believe, and it just shows you the difference in the game. Henry Childs would run this route down the seam, and Archie would throw the ball at an arc. So Childs is looking back like this to catch the ball. Well, here comes a safety at full speed, seeing that ball coming. So as soon as Charles gets it, he's getting a face full of, because the guy, you could launch yourself into players back then, would launch right into your tight end, and he'd still come down with the ball. I mean, but I saw some hits that he took. So I'm like, oh my God. So one of these guys still alive.
Yeah.
So, Bob, you're going to be out of town. I'm going to recap the show. You're going to be out of town next week. So there's no Under the Dome next week. I'm not going to do the show with you, obviously. I'm going to be on Bayou Blitz with Brendan. But this week, there is no Bayou Blitz show because Brendan's going to be out of town on vacation, correct?
Yes, Brendan is out of town this week. Next week, I will be in Virginia Beach. I'll probably dust myself off to do my quick Geordie segment, and have you guys send me the Bayou Blitz link for Wednesday night. Depending, if I could pop in for a little bit, I will. But yeah, we just for most of you follow both Under the Dome and Bayou Blitz, and we thank you for it. But you're only going to be able to see our faces, two of our faces once this week and two of our faces once next week. And Alan Ulrich is going to be the only constant.
Yeah, that's a curse. Yeah, so when you come in, I'm sure we're going to smell the sea air coming in over the internet as you do this. This is something else we'll probably end up talking about. New uniforms reveal next Tuesday. The speculation is for the first time since 2002, they'll have the gold uniforms. And I'm seeing guys already putting the white helmets with the gold uniform and the white pants from the Color Rush. And I'm like, we look like friggin' Georgia Tech. What the hell? But I've said it before. Tom Benson so hated the gold jerseys that Reebok came out with that he sold them immediately after the game. Typical Tom Benson. He just doesn't burn them. He sells them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll never forget that because they wanted like $1,000 for a gold jersey from Joe Horn or Deuce McAllister or whatever. I'm like, man, for $1,000, the player better still be in it. I'm not gonna pay $1,000 for that. I'm gonna wear mine next week for the Bayou Blitz. I'll wear my Deuce McAllister one. But yeah, the New Jersey is going to drop the white helmets. We talked about that in the Bayou Blitz. It's Nike for you. It's the fashion show. So in the meantime, Bob, you have a good vacation.
Thank you.
Next week, less than a week from today, the Saints show up for training camp 2025. 9 practices are open to the public here in New Orleans. They go to after the Chargers game, they stay in Los Angeles for a week at the same place they were last year, UC Irvine.
Yes.
And then they come back. I think training camp breaks after that because they have one preseason game. I think the camp breaks after that. And
Sounds right.
They start preparing. And again, just like everything else, it's only one cut. It's not like how it used to be with 2 cuts. There's one cut at the end of the end of training camp, and then there's 10 days or something ridiculous like that before the first regular season game. So season's upon us. Bob, thanks for sticking with me for so long. I know I'm watching you yawn there. I know you're ready to
Sorry.
go. No, that's okay. I'm the same way, man. I'm the same way. Check us out next week on the Bayou Blitz. No Under the Dome. Bayou Blitz no Bayou Blitz this week. Bayou Blitz next week only. So in the meantime, thank you guys, and we'll see you next time. Good night, everybody. Putting my fingers all in the way.